Which country had the most recent local elections in Europe that nearly brought down the ruling government? If you guessed France, you guessed correctly. France is a dynamic country with a deep history and unique social and political structure. Hi, I'm Jesse Mandel, and as part of our discovery of France, I'm going to review the latest news as well as France's social and political organization. What's the biggest news item in France currently? The answer is the municipal French elections, which took place at the end of March 2014. Politics in France are resoundingly local, and the elections on a town level are a heavy indicator of the feeling of the ordinary citizen towards parties and policies on a national level. The biggest news of the election, as we see on the map, was that Marine Le Pen's nationalist Front National party in gray took control of 11 towns across the country, easily surpassing its past record of 4 towns. At least 140 more towns swung from left to mainstream opposition conservative, la droite, or right, as voters punished President Hollande for his failure to turn around the Eurozone's second largest economy and tackle an unemployment rate stuck at above 10%. In fact, the results boded so poorly for President Hollande's ruling Socialist Party that France's Prime Minister, Jean-Marc Ayrault, top left in the sash, and all 38 of his ministerial colleagues stepped down following the election. In order to help shore up his power, Mr. Hollande replaced Mr. Ayrault with Manuel Valls, the Interior Minister, who is the most popular socialist politician among conservatives. On a positive note for the socialist government, their candidate for mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, on the bottom, was elected, becoming the first woman to serve in that job and one of a still small number of female mayors of large cities. As we can see, France's political scene is undergoing tremendous shifts as the country tries to right itself following the financial crisis and as a response to Hollande's austerity measures. I mentioned the Nationalist Front National and the Socialist Party, but who are the other major French political parties and what do they stand for? So again, who are the major parties and players? Here we have Marine Le Pen on the left, who's the head of the Front National, or the Nationalist Party, which opposes immigration and favors return to the traditional values, quote, as they call it. Here we have a political poster from their most recent elections. The text in English says, "The immigrants are going to vote, and you abstain?" The recent election results seem to suggest that their message is unfortunately becoming more popular. Next, in the middle, we have the UMP, or the Union for a Popular Movement, which is a center-right party previously led by ex-President Nicolas Sarkozy. The party supports solidarity, with the state guaranteeing social protection of less fortunate individuals, but at the same time does not support welfare handouts. All the way on the right, we have François Hollande and the Socialist Party, which is committed to workers' rights, access to health care, and education for all citizens, as well as state support for citizens in need. They currently hold the presidency, and the president is François Hollande. He was elected in 2012, defeating Sarkozy. So, where is the best place to find out about French current events and politics? The French press, which we're going to review in the next slide. So, what are the best sources for country news, and the best way to learn about what's going on in France? CNN and the New York Times are excellent sources, but for the latest, it's best to go local. For this project, I ended up using Google Translate on a few newspapers' websites. French media is in rapid change, however. In fact, the government had a monopoly on French television until 1986. There's still heavy regulation of ownership, though. Newspaper and print companies are not allowed to acquire a new newspaper if the acquisition boosts their total daily circulation over 30%. Popular newspapers, on the right, include Le Monde and Le Figaro, and we have a selection of French television channels on the left. Next, we will review French social and political organization. One could say that the French work to live while Americans live to work. In fact, a law to reduce the statutory working week in France from 39 to 35 hours was introduced in 2000 for companies with more than 20 employees, and in 2002 for companies with 20 employees or fewer. Jennifer Colombi, who visited Lyon as part of a Baruch College study abroad trip in 2014, noted that most French workers she met saw work as a necessary evil and that they didn't have the same drive to succeed that Americans have. She relayed that many French entrepreneurs moved to the U.S. because it's easier to start companies and find like-minded colleagues here. Let's look at the chart prepared for the Center for Economic and Policy Research. There are 11, or 13 in some provinces, national holidays in France, plus up to 22 days of RTT, or Réduction du temps de travail, In English, reduction of working time for employees that choose to work more than 35 hours per week. The limit that any person can work is 39 hours. Further additional hours are compensated in almost all cases by money and not by additional leave. The average is 30 days off per year for vacation. Compare this all the way on the right to the US, where there are 0 mandatory days off. So what does it mean to work in France? The working culture is guided by principles of hierarchy, traditions, and attention to detail. As such, logical reasoning and high levels of analysis are used to guide the office culture, which can be seen as slow and procedural. There is an enjoyable book written by Rosencrantz Baldwin, Paris, I Love You, But You're Bringing Me Down, about his experience as an American working in a Parisian advertising office. Some differences he noted with American offices included the following. As a given, he worked for a top advertising firm, so his experiences might not be the norm. His office had a champagne fridge. When coming into the office in the morning, employees visited each other at their desks and exchanged greetings and le bis, or small kisses on the cheek. Smoking on the office terrace was an integral part of the day's activities, and the time when everyone goes on vacation, the month of August, is referred to as la mort saison, or the dead season. In fact, employees tend to break for lunch and coffee at the same times and together. Andrew Gibson, now director at Deutsche Bank and formerly a vice president at Credit Lyonnais, a French securities firm, affirmed that many French share these collectivist characteristics. Although in his case, wine was served with lunch, and all employees ranked VP and higher could enjoy it in the executive dining room. On the top left, we have a chart telling us a little bit more about how productive workers are. The French might take longer vacations, but they end up producing more GDP per hour worked than American workers do, and working several hundred fewer hours per year. On the right, we have a chart that tells us a little bit about the healthcare system in France. And France's health and social security system covers all employees. Number one, the French pay social taxes that cover 30% of healthcare costs, while the government picks up the rest. Interestingly, in 2005, U.S. government spending, came out to $6,400 per person. In France, it was only $3,300. The French pay up front with additional taxes and then are 100% covered, while in the U.S. we prefer to pay out of pocket for our medical needs. This chart from The Economist sheds even more light on who pays for what in France. Social insurance, collected in from every worker, absorbs most of the cost. Let's think about unions in France for a minute. Trade unions represent midwives, civil servants, audiovisual technicians, and people that unions in the U.S. wouldn't even have much to do with, and employ about 8% of workers in France, a number that has fallen from about 30% in the 1950s. The source of French union strength today is the statutory power they enjoy as joint managers, along with business representatives of the country's health and social security system, and as employees' representatives in the workplace. This photo on our bottom left shows two Goodyear executives in France. You can tell it's Goodyear because the workers have effectively kidnapped them by rolling a tire into the only door that they can use to get out. French employees were very upset that the executives were considering layoffs. Can you picture this happening in the U.S.? Under French law, elected union delegates represent all employees, union or not, in firms with over 50 people on staff. They sit on the workers' councils, and the councils must be consulted regularly by management on a vast range of detailed managerial decisions. This gives trade unions a daily say in the running of companies across the private sector, which accounts for the real strength of their voice. Finally, we're going to talk a little bit about employee terminations in France. As we know, in the U.S., most employees are at will, and they can leave whenever they want, but firms can also fire them whenever they want. In France, the laws on licenciement, as firing in France is called, are complex. In the end, there are essentially 4 ways for an employee to deliver a pink slip. All involve time or money or both, because employees who don't want to go quietly can file a complaint with the Conseil de Prud'homme, the court that rules on terminations. Number 1, the firm has to prove that they can't afford the person's role. A company must be able to prove in court that eliminating the position is necessary either because of economic woes or because it is essential to remain competitive. Companies must also show that they can't transfer the employee to another job. Number two, firms need to prove that the employee was a non-performer. Again, the company has to be able to prove in court that the grounds are real and serious, which can be difficult. In the New York Times, there was an article about this, and you'll see the quote at the end and the citation at the end. But for a salesman, for example, you have to demonstrate that his performance is not due to a bad product or a bad market. Third, you can pay the employee to leave. For blue-collar workers, this is usually 2 or 3 months' salary, but can be as long as 6 months for white-collar workers. And fourth, you can do something called put him in a cupboard and throw away the key. Some managers with problem employees simply put them in the cupboard, as the French saying goes, which usually means moving them out of the way and leaving them alone in hopes that they eventually quit. Putting them in a cupboard is a very expensive option because employees continue to draw a salary as long as they show up and don't give the company cause to fire them. Lastly, to conclude, France is a unique place to work and live. I hope this part of our presentation was elucidative and you've learned a little bit more about how the French vote, vacation, and work. Vive la France! On our last page we have some sources for those who are interested in learning more. Thank you very much.